Well, I'm honored to represent the Simon Wiesenthal Center on May 7th, 2025, the eve of the 80th anniversary of the surrender of the German military 13 years into the self-proclaimed 1,000-year Nazi Third Reich. I'm also very humbled to represent the spirit and courage of Mr. Simon Wiesenthal, the Holocaust survivor who emerged as the unofficial ambassador for 6 million Jewish ghosts, and who for decades stood virtually alone as the heroic Nazi hunter. Through his efforts and against all odds, he helped bring 1,100 Nazi war criminals before the bar of justice. In the presence of the diplomatic corps and the members of the Bundestag, I'll say a few words that I wrote last week, not really knowing exactly what the audience would be, but words that we say in Hebrew, Dvarim hayotzim min halev nichtasim al halev. If you're speaking from the heart, then those words will enter the heart. This evening, we will march Christians and Jews together to the Brandenburg Gate to remember that momentous date. But will we be celebrating? And if so, what? I'm here in Berlin, first and foremost, to recognize and thank the soldiers of the Allied forces who fought, bled, and died in staggering numbers to defeat Nazi Germany and its allies. For the younger people here, a quick reminder that World War II was the largest and most violent military conflict in human history. Official casualty sources estimate battle deaths at nearly 15 million military personnel and civilian deaths north of 38 million. The battles were fought largely between two opposing military alliances, the Allies and the Axis, the war which engulfed Europe, North Africa, and much of Asia, along with the world's oceans. Germany, Japan, and Italy led the loosely cooperating Axis. The major allies were the United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union, although a great many other nations committed their most precious resources, their husbands, their fathers, their sons and daughters. We Jews owe our continued presence on this planet to their sacrifice. Despite the fact that the Allies failed to make the saving of Jews a priority, their foot soldiers, Soviets at Auschwitz-Birkenau, the Americans at Buchenwald, Dachau, Mauthausen, the British at Bergen-Belsen, and many other camps did, we use the term, liberate, quote unquote, the remnants of our people. And for that, we say thank you, and we pray that God rest your souls for defeating the evil that was Hitler's Nazi Third Reich. It was not the fault of the brave soldiers from the USSR, from the UK, the Commonwealth of Nations, the US, that were unprepared for what they saw when they flung open the gates of hell. This was a man-made hell crafted by cold-blooded but dedicated technocrats who, from the day of the Wannsee Kampf protocols were drafted, worked tirelessly and effectively to create an industrial-size road to genocide of an entire people, the Jews of Europe, along with others deemed unworthy of living. Gone forever was the dynamic subculture of European Jewry. Erased in their millions were our rabbis, teachers, scholars, and students the gatekeepers of the Torah, of Jewish values that date back thousands of years and continue to be the source of life for our people. Gone were the creative geniuses and artists like Friedel Dicker Brandeis, a great Bauhaus figure whose humanity drove her to shun a guaranteed visa of safety and instead became the art teacher of a group of Jewish children, each of whom had witnessed the murder of their own parents, and taught each of those children to rekindle hope and love through art in the Theresienstadt concentration camp. Friedel was later deported with all of her young students, where they were guests on arrival at Auschwitz-Birkenau. Already on Kristallnacht in November 1938, synagogues in this great city of Berlin and across Germany and the next night in Austria were burned to the ground, making brutally clear that the Nazis were not only going to destroy Jewish lives, but that they were devoted to eradicating Jewish life. And to achieve both goals, the Nazis and their allies, in pursuit of genocide, specifically targeted Jewish children. Anne and Margot Frank were among 1.2 Jewish children who were murdered mercilessly by Nazi Germany. In 2025, 80 years later, it's especially important to remember that genocides, yes, we can now talk, unfortunately, in plural, that genocides each also have an economic component to them. Real estate, personal jewelry, religious items, bank accounts, insurance, artwork, and eventually even human hair and gold teeth would be removed from the dead and dying during the Shoah. Geniuses in banking saw to it that the necessary funds needed to build the vast death camp at Auschwitz-Birkenau would be supplied. Banks in neutral countries on both sides of the Atlantic were all too eager to collaborate and profit before, during, and after World War II from the Nazi program of plunder and extermination. Those lessons need to be learned today because they're still motivating mass killings all over the world. Make no mistake, the first goal was a Judenfrei Europe. But as we Americans know, had Hitler won this war, had he defeated Churchill's England early on, he would have eventually demanded that the U.S. turn over their Jews. And I can remember like it was yesterday when Simon said to me, "Don't be fooled and don't be naive. If you think there weren't people in the United States who were ready, willing, and able to turn over the Jews if Hitler asked for them or demanded them." So the challenge extended not only to the nations that were conquered, but also to the nations that fought back and eventually defeated Nazi Germany. So we express our gratitude to the millions who paid the price to defeat the German military, the criminal SS, Hitler, and his allies. But the puzzle still remains 80 years later, not about Hitler, Himmler, Eichmann, and their ilk, but these questions. What transformed so quickly Germany's lawyers and judges, academics, doctors, journalists, artists, and yes, as was noted, even some major faith leaders, to cast aside their values and cast aside any semblance of decency and swallow whole the Nazi ideology? Greed, desire, hate, apathy? What drove neighbors to turn in their neighbors? What drove Germans to boycott and loot Jewish stores? What drove friends to become enemies and informants? What drove elite institutions of higher learning to turn against Albert Einstein and others? What drove the most advanced society here in Berlin to burn instead of reading books? These are difficult questions that the German people, and frankly all of us, 80 years later, need to confront. Because while Hitler died in the bunker in 1945, Jewish hatred is surging in Germany, across Europe, North America, and Australasia. Because even as the last eyewitnesses, thank God, are still with us, even as the remnants of the concentration and death camps dot the landscape of Germany and Eastern Europe, Holocaust denial thrives on social media and is even the cornerstone of the foreign policy of a member state of the United Nations, the murderous Iranian regime. Because today in 2025, there are new calls for boycotts of the Jewish state and Jewish businesses and those who do business with the Jewish state. Because today in 2025, the words, "Death to the Jews," are again heard on the streets of Germany's largest cities, even if they're chanted only in Arabic. Because today in Berlin and Amsterdam and London and Paris and Oslo and Brussels and Stockholm and yes, Toronto, Montreal, New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles, anti-Semites from the most elite universities in the mainstream media, actors, comedians, pundits, and influencers. Jew hatred again is once again mainstream, with most of the perpetrators knowing that they won't be held accountable, they won't have to pay a price for their hatred. So in the presence of young people who are here today, Jews and Christians, and our caretakers of faith communities, and our elected officials in a democracy, and Germany deserves all the credit for embracing and growing and thriving its flawed democracy, because we don't know of any perfect democracies anyway. But in their presence, my final thought is that here in Berlin, we need the generations of the 21st century to take the lead in saying no to hate, no to greed, and especially no to apathy. We need you to take the lead against Jew hatred and Holocaust denial. Only with your commitment, with your help and creativity, and yes, with some courage, can we Jews hope that never again will not morph back again to ever again. Thank you.
Thank you for watching our video. If you like what you just saw, then subscribe to our channel. If you want to see more videos about the March of Life, simply click here. And if you want to learn more about the March of Life as an organization, visit our website.